I'm Adam Pascarella, and welcome to episode 29 of The Power of Bold.
From New York City, it's The Power of Bold, the podcast on risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and bold living. Join us as we interview world-class performers, analyze life-changing books, and gather actionable insights to help you achieve your goals. Here's your host, Adam Pascarella.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this latest episode of the podcast. I hope you're having a great week. This is episode 29 of the show, and I'm happy to share my conversation with Tim Alison. One of the primary objectives of this show is to help and inspire those of you who are hoping to take some bold action in your life, whether it relates to your career, your personal life, or both. It can be difficult. I was in the same position as you are. So my goal is to find awesome guests that can give you some new perspective, some new ideas, and some tangible steps to make it easier to take that bold step. With that objective in mind, I was happy to speak with Tim. Tim's story is unique, yet familiar to many of us. In his late 20s, he seemed to have it all. He had a 6-figure job in Toronto and a terrific wife and family. Everything looked great from the outside, yet he wasn't happy with where his career was heading. Therefore, Tim took bold, aggressive action by moving with his family from Toronto to a small fishing village in Nova Scotia, Canada, to start an educational startup. The business was successful, and now Tim coaches entrepreneurs, would-be entrepreneurs, and others who want to pursue their dreams. The overarching theme of Tim's work can be summed up in a 3-word phrase: screw the naysayers. In my conversation with Tim, we spoke about a variety of topics, including how Tim made his drastic career change, the problems inherent within loss aversion, recruiting team members when building a business outside of a major city, and, yes, how to deal with the naysayers who say that your dreams are impossible to achieve. So let's jump right into it. Here's my discussion with Tim Alison. Tim Alison, thanks for appearing on The Power of Bold.
Adam, man, I can't thank you enough for having me on the show.
Of course, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast, because your story really goes to the crux of what we try to do here. And our goal is to help ambitious people take rational career risks. And one way we help them do that is to speak with people who have done precisely that. And then from there, my goal is to extract insights so that our listeners can not only think of how to take that risk, but to help them actually take that risk to take action and achieve their dreams. So, considering all of that, I'd like to begin by spending some time talking about your personal story. And I think a good way to start is the moment when you decided you needed to make a major career change. I've spoken with many people on this podcast who have done such a thing, and I find their stories really interesting and insightful. So having said that, if you were to start talking about your entrepreneurial origin story, so to speak, where would you begin?
Yeah, it's always a bit of a challenge. I guess the first thing that I picked up on was your choice of the word moment. And I know for some people that's, there is this click, this switch that goes off. And one of my guests is a guy named Fraser Cameron, and, he came home from work and his 4-year-old son asked him, "Dad, why are you always so grumpy?" And, that triggered it. For me, Adam, it wasn't a single moment. I was living in Toronto, where I'd been born and raised, and really I think I'd done what I'd been raised to do. I mean, I'd gone to school, I got into a good university, I got my degree, I landed a good job, and I was racing up the corporate ladder. I was working in corporate sales, and from the outside looking in, man, I was the poster child for what success was supposed to look like. I mean, I by the time I was 27 years old, something like that, I had a 6-figure income. By the time I was 28, I was managing sales offices in 3 cities in Canada, basically from Toronto all the way to the East Coast. So, half of the country. Yeah. The sales team that was working for me were all 10 or 15 years older than me. The income was getting even higher. I had company car. I wore tailor-made clothes, monogrammed shirts, gold chains. I mean, everybody thought, this guy is kicking it. And I had been doing exactly what I thought I was supposed to be doing, which was to provide for my family and move up that corporate ladder and make as much money as I can. And I wasn't honestly a very nice person in those days. It was just all about just working your way up type of thing. And but underneath it all, what people couldn't see is that I was killing myself, man. I mean, I had by the time I turned 31, which is when I did make the move towards entrepreneurship. I mean, I had 2 children. I would get up in the morning to go to work, and I would leave before they were out of bed. Because rush hour traffic was such that if you didn't leave really early, you just couldn't get into the office, at any reasonable time. I'd be home at night after they were already in bed, and I was traveling probably 2 weeks out of 4, not seeing them at all. I was abusing alcohol, and I realized partly because I was, struggling with the in those days. It was always, what have you done for me today type of mentality. And if you had a great year, then next year they wanted 20% more. And then next year they wanted, other people were setting all my goals, Adam, and it was just killing me. And then the other thing was the lifestyle. Because I was traveling all the time on an expense account, I was expected to be either taking employees out or clients out and wining and dining. So I actually, I agonized over the decision to quit for over a year.
Oh, did you?
I have a book called Screw the Naysayers where I kind of talk about it, and I described it as I felt like I was standing under a leaky bag of cat urine, but I just couldn't move. And I know it sounds crazy, but I literally would wake up in the middle of the night, Adam, with these dueling conversations going on in my head. I mean, there'd be one, self-ego would be saying, you've got to quit, because if you don't, you're going to be dead or divorced, within the next 5 years, maybe both, maybe sooner. And the other one is saying, are you an idiot? Because nobody walks away from a job like this. Everybody would love to have your job.
Sure.
And you've got kids, and it costs a lot of money to raise kids, and you've got, you've just got to suck it up, because this is what life is all about. And I agonized, that decision, back and forth and until finally, one day I just literally got up and I printed off a letter of resignation. My boss was out of town, which was actually not a coincidence, because I didn't want him to try and talk me out.
Oh, yeah.
And I walked into the office and I dropped it on his desk. And, the moment it hit the desk, I mean, it's just so hard to describe the sense of relief that, that the closest thing I can equate it to is that now and later in life, I've started to meditate. And, when you actually hit that moment in time when you just release everything, it was just like that, and but the problem was that I had decided along with my wife, we were going to not just quit. I was going to move to rural Nova Scotia, to this little fishing village where she had been born and raised, and start my own business. And, that is the other word I picked up on in your intro was rational, because it felt rational to me. It truly did. We loved that place. It was where Debbie was from. I wanted to raise my kids there. But to everybody around me, it was the most irrational decision I could ever have possibly made.
Right.
They just called me every name in the book.
And so if I could just go back just a little bit here. So you're a fast riser in your company. You're clearly ambitious. Things seem to be going well on the outside, but on the inside you're unhappy. And I think a lot of people feel this way. I think even especially millennials, professional millennials, we're kind of an impatient generation. We want things in our careers to be happening sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And even though things, may be on the right track in your job, you have these goals for yourself, but they aren't coming to fruition. They're not coming into reality. And so at that moment, you have this other goal of things you want to do, but then there are also psychological factors of leaving as well. There's, the idea of loss aversion, and we fear losses more than gains. And
sure.
I think that millennials and people that want to start their own business that are in jobs like yours, they have the golden handcuffs. The longer they stay, the more acclimated they become to the salary and lifestyle that they have. and you were able to break out of that. So I'm assuming you did feel the golden handcuffs at that moment. How did you put those feelings aside and actually take action?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I mean, I used that very same word way back then, the golden handcuffs. I mean, I even had stock options in the company that became useless when I quit. Like, I couldn't take them with me,
right.
And all those kind of things. I guess the first thing I would say is that really is why I agonized over it, so long. The advice I would give anybody that's trying to overcome that today is simply to take a step back and figure out what it is you really value in life. And the reason I was so miserable is because things that were very important to me, like spending time with my kids, like being a present parent. I've always loved being outdoors, and being around nature, and I had no time to do that. The friends, that I was hanging out with, they weren't really my friends, Adam. They were the people that I knew at work, and the only thing I had in common with them was work.
Yeah.
They weren't. They really didn't, at a certain level, give a crap about me. They cared about whether I was successful or not because it was impacting their, income and those kinds of things. I didn't see it that way at the time. But what happened, it's going to happen one or two ways, folks. I mean, if you're one of those millennials that's sort of drifting in that direction, I hear this over and over and over again. You're either going to hit some sort of infrastructure rattling event, which for me was to the point where my health got so bad, like I felt so miserable. And, I was literally, Adam, drinking a bottle of Pepto-Bismol every single night and still had heartburn. And I've talked to so many other people, my age and younger, that have gone through it, and they've either had heart attacks or divorce or, something, end up in the hospital. I mean, something lose their job, because of stress or whatever, or just they're redundant. It's either going to take some sort of infrastructure rattling event like that, which is really painful, or you take a look at the things that you really care about. And if you can't adjust your life so that the things that you really care about, including having purpose in life, and I was also really struggling with being held accountable for things that I didn't control. I mean, that's a really hard thing as an employee, isn't it? They come to us and they say, the further up you get, well, just fix it.
Sure. But
what if I can't? What if it's nothing to do with me, or not with the ability to fix it is not within my control? When I have my own company, and you're an entrepreneur, you have those sort of, you own the problems and you own the ability to act. So I'm rambling a little bit here, man, but I mean, the first part of it was easy for me because I just knew that I knew in my heart that if I didn't quit, something really bad was going to happen. But here's where I have to get real with you. One big mistake that I made after that, and it cost me 3 years of spinning my wheels. When I left that job and moved out here to Nova Scotia, I bought into the idea that I had sacrificed any hope of a successful career in return for the freedom to be my own boss and raise my kids in this community that I'm still in 30 years later, still looking at the same trees out my window they're a little bigger, but I really did, Adam. For 3 years, I went around telling people that my sole goal in life was to make enough money to put food on the table and pay the bills. And for a good period of that time, I was actually still very unhappy because you touched upon it, that sense of loss. I was actually grieving the loss of, my job, a job that was killing me, mind you, but because I had worked so damn hard to get it, and I felt like I could never get something back again, And it's the limiting self-beliefs that is really what's holding everybody back. And, I was fortunate enough. I mean, it took me 3 years, but I was fortunate enough. I ran into a guy from Minneapolis. He was, rest in peace, Roy, but Roy was a Polish New Englander living in Minneapolis at the time. We were talking about, partnering together in some various activities. And I kept telling him that, well, Roy, I can't work with you on a national basis in Canada. I'm in Nova Scotia. I'm in this little fishing village. I mean, people aren't going to respect me living out here. I'm 4 hours from the nearest major airport and all these kind of things. And he just, kept looking at me. And this is way back in the day, man, when you had to mail your checks for your credit card statements, in the mail type of thing. And he looked at me and he said, Tim, I mail my check to American Express somewhere in South Dakota or North Dakota or where. He said, I don't know where the hell it is and I don't care. why do you think just because you're living in Nova Scotia that you can't have a kick-ass career? Because you were really good, and I can tell that you're really good. And he was like 30 years older than me. And when I listen to a guy with that kind of experience telling me, hey, man, you can actually do this, that is the light switch moment when I think I went from being the person who was sort of escaped the life in Toronto, and I had my business. I was making exactly what I said I wanted to do. I was making enough money to put food on the table,
Sure.
Not a cent more. And it just proved to me that, what we believe is a huge determinant on what we actually achieve. And after Roy came into my life and sort of spurred me on to, get my confidence back, I mean, holy cow, man, it took off. And that, I had an educational software company in this little fishing village, and that everybody said was, and I mean everybody, people in government, anybody I talked to said that will never work. From down there. And, we went on to sell about $10 million worth of software out of this little fishing village. And I think I'm even prouder of the fact that the software we were selling was teaching adults, remedial training and like reading and numeracy and literacy and all those kind of things to sort of upgrade your skills, like social to it. And, it's really, it was just such a bizarre ride. Yeah. But I think the first thing is to realize that the golden handcuffs are not real. They are not. I know they're financial. They feel like if you surrender that, you can never get it back. But it's bullshit. You can get it back. There's all sorts of ways to live your life. There's all sorts of ways to make money now more than ever. Holy cow! The scope of opportunities to get out there and with technology and make money is infinite.
Right.
Right. And you can recreate, and you can be your own boss, and you can, create a lifestyle. Like, I mean, I one of my big goals was, as my kids were growing up, I wanted to be a present parent. And, I'm in Canada, man, so my son played hockey. I did not miss a weekend hockey game in 12 years. Huh. And I was still traveling a lot on business, but I would fly home. Yeah. If I would just refuse to, even if it cost me a pile of money, I said, no, there's a hockey game this weekend. And my daughter played soccer and basketball, and those were mostly school sports. And I would set up my schedule so that I could take an afternoon off and be one of the volunteer drivers to take the girls around to the various teams and get to see all these games and hang out with them. I worked just as hard, but I chose my own hours. And, how do you put price tags on stuff like that?
It's impossible. Yeah. And like you were saying in the beginning, when you were at your job, one of your priorities for your next opportunity was spending time with your kids, and you lived that, you made that a priority, you actually made it happen. And I would just just to speak a little bit about how you actually left, because a couple things. First, you said this was about 30 years ago, so back then, entrepreneurship clearly wasn't as trendy or as sexy as it is now. And I'm sure if you want to leave your secure job to start a business now, people think you're crazy, but I'm sure they thought you were even crazier back when you started your business. And along with that, saying that you wanted to move to Nova Scotia and move to an entirely different environment, people must have thought you were crazy.
They did.
Yeah, they did. And so your podcast is called Screw the Naysayers. They suck anyway. I do want to talk about that a little bit later on, but at least in the beginning, when you made that decision, you undoubtedly encountered those naysayers. They could have even been really close to you. They could have been members of your family. So how did you first acknowledge what they were saying and thinking? And how did you proceed anyway? How did you maintain those relationships and proceed?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I think I'll first try and answer it in the moment, like when I was there. But then, if I can, Adam, just to also looking back a little bit with perspective, I'll offer some comments. I mean,
sure.
In the moment, it's hard. But I guess, to be honest, I just, other than my wife, I just decided to shut down the conversation. I came to the conclusion, and I believe this is, if I could give just one piece of advice to people that are questioning their direction in life, I don't care what it is, but if you're questioning your direction in life, and particularly, if you're on the right path type of thing, at the end of the day, there is only one person whose, opinion counts, and that's yours. Nobody, even including a spouse, can tell you fundamentally what is making you happy and what's making you miserable. Now it's not to say you don't take other people into consideration. And if, you value your family, you value your spouse or partner and all that kind of stuff, of course you talk to them. But, you can't, and I was lucky because, Debbie actually, it's ironic, man, because she's from this community. She really didn't want to move. She was liking Toronto. We had 2 young kids. She did not drive. She could go out of our front door. We lived in a nice community. There was a park literally in our backyard. Like, if we could have tossed the kids over the fence, you could have got there right that way, but you just walked around. She could walk to a shopping mall on those hot, steamy days or whatever, to the air-conditioned shopping mall and, wander around and buy ice cream and do all those kind of things. If she wanted to go somewhere, the transit system was great. And, I was dragging her back to this little fishing village where guys walked around in rubber boots and red plaid shirts and drove pickup trucks. And if you didn't have a car, you couldn't drive, you couldn't get by, but she still supported me because I think she clearly saw what the job was doing to me. But the other people, I remember my mother, when I told my mother, bless her heart, but it's ironic, here's another irony, she later moved down here to be close to her grandkids. But at the time, I told her that, that I was quitting this job and that we were moving to Nova Scotia. And she was a chain smoker, and she just about swallowed her cigarette and sputtered out something like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to start my own educational software company. And I thought she was going to have a heart attack on the spot. And you got to understand, man, that we were talking, this is going to date me, but we were talking 1988, Adam. Mm-hmm. There was no internet.
Yeah.
There were no laptop computers. The desktop computer that you had didn't have a hard drive.
Right.
There was this thing called a fax machine, which I bought one. It cost me $2,500 to put a fax machine, but it did have a little cassette tape answering machine with it as well. So it was in that environment, I'm saying to people, I'm going to create software, that's going to train people in businesses and organizations, and then ultimately, other audiences, using computers. I couldn't explain it to anybody. Right. Nobody understood. And that I think is why, I didn't realize it at the time, but why it undermined my confidence enough for me to still do it, but to not really go for it. Mm-hmm. But
where did the interest in educational software emerge? Because
sure.
you could have gotten another job. Maybe the opportunity wasn't right for you, but you decided not only to start your own business, but to start something in education. So where did that passion come from?
Yeah, well, so the company that I was working for, we were in Toronto. We were actually selling, originally video-based training programs, and then some of the earliest computer-based training programs to large businesses and organizations around the world. So I knew a lot about, the state of educational technology in those days, and I kind of liked it. And so, I was confident in my ability to understand, the application of the technologies. And that really is, was the root of it. It evolved from working with corporations and businesses into working with at-risk youth and adults, mostly by chance. But one of the most important events in my life, but it was Roy actually who invited me to go to a sales conference in California. And it was in February, and in San Diego, I guess it was. And it was cold as hell and snowing out here. And he said, if you fly down there on your own expense, we'll pay for your hotel room and your meals, and we'll show you all these products that we'd like to consider working with you on. And so, I said to my wife, I said, sorry, dear, I have to go. Mm-hmm. and off we went. But the thing is, what I would like to say is looking back at at that transition. It's crystal clear to me now that, what we have to do is just focus on the things that we want in life. If we're spending so much time telling people they have to have a purpose, and we do, you'll find your purpose. It's just going to come to you. Like my purpose right now is impacting young people and helping people make that transition to the life of entrepreneurship if they want, because I love it. But you'll find that purpose. But the things you really want in life they're inherent. They're intrinsic. You don't have to justify them to anybody. Mm-hmm. If you have kids and you want to be a present parent, nobody has the right to tell you that that's not a top level goal. If you love living in the city and want to be there and like the, everything, the whole atmosphere and vibe of it and everything else, then nobody has the right to tell you that you're crazy for doing that. If you like, working outside, or if you're a dancer, or you've got a creative side that you want to play, it's if you just take a piece of paper and write the word "I value" at the top of it and write down the things that you really care about, then it gets really easy to say, well, is what I'm doing right now aligned with these things that I value?
Sure.
Because I'll guarantee you, Adam, if anybody that's unhappy, anybody that's questioning where they're at, if they can really figure out what it is they truly value, one or more of those values is in conflict with something that's going on in your life right now.
Right.
So you first have to figure out which of those values are in conflict. And then I had to decide, for example, if the current job wasn't giving me the kind of balance where I could be a present parent, I could have, and I actually did look around a bit to see if there might be another job in the city that, that would afford me an opportunity to spend more time with my kids and all that. But nothing that was going to be anywhere close in terms of the level of financial compensation that I'd been getting would have, offered me that, that opportunity. And so it's all about understanding what we really care about, finding out where the conflicts are and fixing them. And in my case, I came to the conclusion that I just wasn't able to find out, and I was right. I mean, I know I was right. I mean, when I got down here, the first 3 months, I barely remember them. I got back into our house, and I put on those rubber boots and the red plaid jacket, and I just started walking around in the wilderness and climbing trees. I'd spend hours just sitting in the woods, just watching nature and stuff like that. I'd come home, and my wife would have to remind me that it was time for a shower. I was really close to a full, breakdown. I might have had one for all I know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk about stuff like that back in those days. That's the other thing,
Right.
But
well, so at this point, so you have these priorities. You want to spend more time with your kids. You want to spend time outdoors, and you travel to this town, and you have a plan of how things are going to work out. But at that point, you were thinking, I need to do whatever is necessary to make it work, right? And that sort of boldness and just aggressive action really opens doors that you wouldn't expect to be opened. Do you have an example of that, where just an opportunity opened up because of the bold action you took?
Oh, look, absolutely, man, and that's exactly the point. I mean, I had the plan, but I did not, or I knew what I wanted, but the steps you take to get there, they change all the time. Because the thing that at least in the world of entrepreneurship that I know, and I'm at it again, I'm creating another new company and hiring people again. But the thing that I've learned a lot, Adam. But one of the things I know for sure is that it's about planting seeds. Mm-hmm. It's about coming up with ideas, things that you care about, going out and trying them. You've got to, you test your ideas. And so I tried all sorts of things. And I was, like I'd said, I was going along for like 3 years there. And I had a mix of products and services that I was offering to selling to local businesses and a bit to some government and stuff like that. By local, I mean maritime. I mean, it was still larger companies like the telephone companies and the power companies and stuff like that. Mm. And I was making a living, no more. And Roy had introduced me to this product on adult literacy, but I looked at it, literacy and numeracy, and he wanted me to take that product on and represent it across the whole country of Canada. And I said, Roy, I can't, because it's American and it doesn't have. There's two problems with it. It doesn't have the math's all in imperial measures. In Canada, we teach our kids metric, an adult's metric. I mean, I can't sell a product up here that doesn't have metric. And then I also said your reading lessons, although they're about reading, they're also about teaching people to be good Americans. Like the lessons are about the U.S. Bill of Rights and how to be a good citizen and all. I said I can't sell that, in Canada, but I could have just said, well, then I can't do it. And I was kind of doing that, and I give Roy some credit. But then I stopped and I said, crap, what if I thought bigger? And what if, and so I went back to them and I said, look, what if because I knew a lot about the technology, Adam, and I looked at the way this course was set up, and I said, I could plug different content into the same screens. I could just change all of the questions, make sure all of the answers that are marked as correct are still the correct answers. And I said, what? I went to it was a Fortune 500 company, and I was a little guy working out of my basement at this time. Mm-hmm. And I said, what if I hired some teachers in Canada and we created some content, and I structured it so that you could just have to plug it into your templates. and we could together have a product that would be, something we could sell all across Canada. And then I would have the rights to that and, pay royalties to you. And, people could have and should have and would have told me that it was the stupidest idea in the face of the earth, that this big company would never do something like that with a guy working on in an office in the basement next to a wood furnace. But they said yes.
Sure.
$10 million of that product we sold, man. Mm-hmm. And it's about, looking at it saying, yeah, I'm going to go invest some money. The other thing that I did in that same moment, when I made the decision to hire those teachers and create that content, I started working on this thing, and it was an expensive product. And so the sales didn't come, the first month or the second month or the third month. And at one stage, I woke up about 6 months in and I said, I'm spending 80% of my time on this new product, and I'm not making any money. A lot of people would have said, well, you've got to go back to spending 80% of your time where you are making your money, which was the corporate training that I've been doing. Mm-hmm. I did the opposite. I got rid of all the stuff that I was making money on and said the problem was I'm not all in.
Yeah.
And I went all in because I believed. I knew it in my heart, and I'd had it in front of customers, and they'd seen it, and I knew it was just a matter of time. So I just doubled down on it. And that really, it changed my life in so many ways because we grew. We ended up moving out of the house. I'm in a little fishing village. I couldn't find an office. I bought an old home and it was falling down, tore it down and built a building and moved my company in it. It's, all of these things, people would have, at a certain stage, people start saying, I was talking on LinkedIn today with one of my friends, Shay Rowbottom was posting about how people that don't support you when you're going through all this stuff become your best friends when you finally start to have some success.
Exactly.
So 5 years into this game, Adam, I was featured on the front page of the Globe and Mail business section, and that's the largest business newspaper in Canada, the only national one. And in those days, it was really, really big. And they literally flew a guy down to my community, took a picture of me on the rocks on a cliff, and I was holding my first laptop computer, so proud of it. And the interview, the title of the article in the paper was "Life with an Ocean View: How to Create Success and Happiness Away from the Rat Race." Mm-hmm. Man, I got people mailing that thing back to me with personal notes on it. I got phone calls. I got emails. Everybody in the world was, "Timmy, me boy, we always knew you were going to do it, man." It's like,
right.
That's it, man. Being bold. I love the theme of your show, and it's not about being stupid. It's not about being standing on a cliff and saying I'm going to jump off that cliff or I'm going to jump out of an airplane without a parachute or something like that. That's not what being bold's about. But what being bold is about for me is if you've got this feeling in your gut that that it's just something you really want to do. If you keep waking up in the middle of the night and this idea keeps coming back over and over and over again, guaranteed you've hit on something that you really, really want to do. And if you can do that, you're going to be, well on the way to a much happier and satisfying and content life. Yeah. Anytime you try and do stuff like that, most of the people around you are going to think you're crazy.
Yeah, of course.
It's not because they don't love you or care for you. It's just they've been trained that failure is bad. And that risk is bad, and you shouldn't do things unless the outcomes are guaranteed. Nothing worth having in life happens if the outcomes are guaranteed.
Yeah, very little is guaranteed, even if you're at a safe corporate job.
No such thing today.
Yeah, right. One thing your story is so interesting, and one thing I think that is especially interesting is that you started this business in Nova Scotia in a small town, and you recruited your team to help you without the internet or email or anything. And I think people that aren't in big cities, I'm currently in New York City, but people that aren't may think that, I need to move to a big city to start my business, to execute my vision. But you're one example of that actually being the opposite. You don't need to move to a bigger city. Can you maybe speak about that more, and maybe the insights that you gathered then that are applicable today?
Yeah, that again is another awesome question, because it actually created a major competitive advantage for me, because I was living in a rural community where the cost of living is far lower, and so if I paid close to fair market wages, which I always did, but they were way above fair market wages in these communities, it earned loyalty like you wouldn't believe, Adam. Like, the people it's really interesting. Like, I've been following a lot of threads on social media about employees don't care and all that. That's a bunch of bull. Employees will care if you care about them. And if you, and especially a smaller company, if you can engage them in your, on what you're trying to achieve and make them feel important. But, I had a technical support guy who he would have walked through walls for me. Did he know anything about this technology when I got here? No. And when I phoned up the company in the States that we were partnering with, and I said, I've hired this guy, I'm going to send him down for some training. They looked at his resume and they said, you're wasting your time. There's no way this guy could learn this stuff. I said, yeah, okay, well, just humor me, eh?
Yeah.
2 years later, he's on a stage at the International Sales Conference where people from all around the world, he's getting an award from me and the president of the parent company for outstanding technical support person in the world. You can teach people that are well-motivated and that care. And then the other example I would give you, at a stage, I just needed some expertise that I just couldn't find here. And look, I had an amazing marketing manager with an MBA and just a huge skill set and passion. She moved here. Like, she was living in a city and she saw this, this posting down here and said, that sounds kind of cool. I can go out and I can live in this rural community and I can go jogging, anytime I want and not have any fear of running into anybody, and and it's a beautiful community, and the guy seems like a great boss. I mean, I think it's actually getting easier, and of course the other thing is that, like, right now I'm working virtually with my team.
Yeah.
I hired my first 2 employees, for Screw the Naysayers Productions, which is sort of where I'm at right now, and one is in Halifax, which is about 200 miles away. I speak with her in some fashion, usually more by chat or messenger or something like that, but occasionally by phone every day. But I've seen her twice in the last 5 months, and the other one is out of country. We can create virtual teams anywhere, and with some of the best talent anywhere in the world for so many businesses. So I mean, I just think that location is. There are benefits to being in the city, but there are benefits to being, in rural communities. So I think it doesn't come down to one being better than the other. I think it comes down to you decide where you want to be and what's going to make you happy and what fits into your life, and then you can make it work.
Yeah.
You absolutely can make it work.
You can leverage the advantages of whatever you choose.
Exactly.
And virtual work democratizes talent in that way, because you can connect with a whole world of talented people. They don't need to be in your location. If I could, so you mentioned Screw the Naysayers Productions, what you're currently working on. I would like to just speak about Naysayers. We've alluded to them earlier on in the conversation. And I like the title of your podcast and production company. It's very, very attractive, very easy to remember. I guess maybe I'd push back a little on Naysayers, or maybe have you explain it more, because I can see the value in Naysayers, right? They may, they're looking out for your best interests. They may see something that you're not seeing, even though they're looking at the negative side of what you want to do. They may have some valuable advice or insights on what you're trying to execute. So can you maybe just talk about that? When you're saying Screw the Naysayers, what exactly are you meaning by that?
Sure. That, again, a good question. And let's face it, there are a lot of different kinds of naysayers. There are the ones out there that are just scumbags. They just want to bring everybody down because their life sucks and they've settled. And so but we're all pretty good at recognizing who those people are, and we can ignore them. So your question is driving to a good point. What do you do with people that that really care about you, or who are offering advice, that they think is in your best interest? I still say this. You have to surround yourself with people whose first questions are, how could we make this happen? Or what, if this is what Adam wants to do, what would need to happen for it to happen, for him to achieve this? You just have to surround yourself with people like that, Adam. And if people approach it by giving you the list of all the things that could go wrong, it's fine. Write them down, but then turn it into a positive and say, okay, in my own mind, I say that's fine. Right. Some of these things are just garbage. Some of these things are just that you just don't believe I can do it. Well, I just ignore those ones because, self-belief is just has to be there. But if you've raised a legitimate, concern, like you're trying to set up a company where there's a massive competitor that's just selling a very similar product at half the price or something like that, you don't ignore stuff like that. You look at it and you say, well, what would have to happen for me to mitigate that risk? What would I have to do in order to overcome that, that challenge? But you want to be with people that are approaching it from that point of view. So like we've created an online community called Entresphere, which is an online mentoring support community for entrepreneurs, and primarily young entrepreneurs. And so the only rule here is you can't tell somebody that it can't be done. Right. It's great to say, look, in my experience, this has been one of the challenges, or this is one of the challenges you might need to overcome. That's positive. But if we say, it's just about words, man. But if you say, Adam, you'll just never be able to do it. It can't work. That's a naysayer. And even if you love them to death, I mean, you don't get them out of your life. But what you do is when it comes to business discussions or life discussions, you have fewer and fewer of them. You talk about the weather, you talk about your sports team, or whatever. Right. But don't, and because if they hit you on a day when you're feeling just a little bit down, they can deflate you, so much more than 20 people you don't know telling you an idiot. Well, you're an idiot. Well, who cares? But so, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, we just have to condition ourselves. And the problem that millennials and Gen Z has, and that's where I spend 99% of my time these days talking to people, 30 and under crowd mostly. The challenge that you've all got is that your parents don't get the world that you're working in. They don't understand that, that by 2020 in the United States, 50% of the jobs are going to be in the gig economy. Now, you could argue that stat. Some people say it's 45, some people 40. But I'll guarantee you this, in 10 years, way more than 50% of those jobs, everybody's going to be freelancing. And you can either look at this as a terrible thing, in which case you're going to get chewed up. And which means you're going to stay in corporate jobs that you don't like. Where if they're respecting you and you're doing great, that's fine. But just know those businesses have no loyalty to you. And the stories are all out there. We've all heard them, where you get whacked at the time when you least expect it, type of thing. If you want to take control, then be bold and take control of your own life. And what I happening, and I've had confirmation from this. I was talking to Judd Borakov, which is a Forbes business coach, one of the hugely respected business coaches to corporations. And he says large corporations are in tough already, because what's happening is they cannot hire the skilled employees that they want. Those people that are good are out freelancing. Right. Not only that, man, we're getting picky about who we work with. Well, you know what? I didn't like the way you handled that TV ad. Or I didn't like the way you treated that severance package for somebody. Or I didn't like what or I don't like your corporate culture. Or I don't like the way you want to monitor my hours. Or, so if you get out into that kind of freelance economy and you develop your skills and you become really good at it, Judd is convinced, he's calling it the people's revolution, and that people just aren't aware is happening yet. But he's right. It's there. It's the next 5 to 10 years. And it's creating enormous opportunities for millennials and for Gen Z to work at that transition. I'm not telling everybody to go quit their job tomorrow. Right. You don't just do something stupid without having that plan. But I'm simply saying that that if you think you can't have a life of freedom, if you think you can't have a life where you get to choose where you want to live, whether it's the penthouse or the country, if you think you can't have a life where you set your own hours, you think you can't have a life where you want to take more vacation time than the average North American company gives you, you're completely wrong. If you think that's exactly what's going to happen, you won't get any of those things. Right. But the moment you start believing that you can, and you surround yourself with people that believe you can, it's transitional. It's transformational.
Yeah, that's all great stuff. And I did like your explanation of these naysayers, because entrepreneurship requires optimism no matter what. And honestly, for me, coming from a field that, takes a little more pessimistic look at things than others, that was a struggle for me. You need to be optimistic. You need to believe that the vision will work. And having those naysayers that offer just no constructive criticism really can sabotage your efforts to try something out that's new, or that may sound, like it may not work. So those naysayers you definitely need to ignore. I agree with that. And I guess just to wrap up here, just so say the listener right now is thinking of starting their own business, or even doing something like you said, doing a side hustle, trying to take some risk. Yet they have some naysayers in their life. They could be bosses or someone as close as a spouse or a parent or sibling. What can they do right after this episode to proceed on their vision of starting a company or doing whatever they want to do while kind of ignoring the naysayers?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Adam, at the risk of being a little bit, self-promoting, but I mean, I would really love if somebody's in that situation for them to head over to screwthenaysayers.com. It's always fun to say that, but I've got an explanation of this community of entrepreneurs that we're bringing together, and it's the whopping price of $9.99 a month, because it's just not. This is about legacy work for me, and it's about bringing people together in that supportive environment. So I would really encourage them to do that. But I mean, just in terms of their own thing, it all has to start with self-belief. So you truly have to find a way to believe in your heart that you deserve more, and you can expect more, and then start by figuring out what that is. Mm-hmm. Like, what are the things you want to change in your life? Like the approach that I'm advocating, and you're doing it yourself, I believe, but the approach I advocate is to build your business around the things that you care about in your life. Yeah. And then you will find the ways in your business. And as I've learned over 30 plus years of being my own boss, I've done it a lot of different ways over the years. But those core goals of living where I want to do, now my family goals are different now because my kids are growing up, and I've got more time again. But you just adjust those things based on, of course, I like to travel. I'm off to Paris next week. So, I mean, you've got to, right about the time I think you'll be pushing this thing out there. So, I mean, it's start with what you really care about. Make that values list. Find a group. If it's not heading over to Screw the Naysayers into Entresphere, which is my community, find a group of fellow entrepreneurs or friends that are interested in the same thing, that believe in you, and start hanging out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that discussion of values. We were talking about it earlier, but just if you prioritize your values, if you work towards them, doors will open, things will happen, and having that self-belief that you will live up to your values, that it'll actually happen. So I think that's an extremely important point. I'm glad that you keep mentioning it. Well, thanks, Tim, for your insights. It's been just an awesome episode and discussion, and your story is very inspiring. I hope that it inspires some listeners to take one step further in achieving their career goals. And before I let you go, can you tell people where to find you? I know you said screwthenaysayers.com. Is that right?
Yeah, that's an awesome place to get me. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. Just Tim Alison, Alison with one L, and I have a really nice network of entrepreneurs and people around the world. So I mean, if you're looking for advice, I'm in a place to connect you with a lot of people too. And my online community, you can either get it at screwthenaysayers.com or just go to members.entresphere, like ENTRE .sphere SPHERE.biz. Any of those things. Screw the STN with Tim Allison on Facebook. Mm-hmm. We're all over the place. If you put my name in, you should find us. And just help others. Carry the message forward. My big ask of everybody really is just to extend a hand and try and make this world a better place.
Excellent. That's great advice. Well, I'll put all of those links and references in our show notes. And thanks again, Tim. I wish you all the best with your podcast and your work in helping people make their dreams come into reality.
My pleasure, man.
Once again, that was Tim Allison, an entrepreneur, author, and host of the podcast titled Screw the Naysayers, They Suck Anyways. Tim has a great story, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. That's all for this episode of The Power of Bold. Show notes and a transcript of this episode can be found on our website. And if you like the show, please give us a review on iTunes or Google Play. Every review helps others find the show, so thanks for your help. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Power of Bold. For show notes and a transcript of this episode, visit thepowerofbold.com. Feel free to get in touch by visiting our Facebook and Twitter pages And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Google Play. We'll see you next time.